In this video, we are going to cover the real truth about the Georgia Guidestones. I'm going to bring you on location right here in Elberton County. This is me. Hello everyone, I'm NEXT, and as mentioned, we're on the site of the now destroyed Georgia Guidestones. The Georgia Guidestones were recently destroyed, and when they were, I made a post on my social media, Facebook and Twitter, which shocked a lot of people. A lot of people were upset when I announced that I believe destruction to the Georgia Guidestones is a heinous crime on par with destruction to Stonehenge or the Giza pyramids. Before I provide an explanation for what I mean, as well as the real truth about the Georgia Guidestones, let me take you over to Egypt. What's up everybody, NEXT here today, coming to you from the Great Sphinx of Egypt. Now you might be thinking, what am I doing at the Great Sphinx of Egypt in a video that is supposed to be about the Georgia Guidestones? Allow me to explain. So the Georgia Guidestones were recently destroyed, and I made a post on social media about how I think destruction of such a monument is a heinous crime on par with destruction that would be caused to the ancient monuments such as Stonehenge or the pyramids. So people are outraged and shocked that I would make such comments, or that I would parallel the Georgia Guidestones to monuments like the Sphinx or Stonehenge or the pyramids or the Kukulkan pyramid. Now, before I provide an explanation and get into the real truth about the Georgia Guidestones, I would just ask that you approach this video with an open mind, to suspend your beliefs for a moment, if you will, and to not allow your judgment to be overwhelmed by unreasoning faith in a manner that it would ignore solid evidence. I think this is a very reasonable and sound suggestion, and the quote you see on screen right now exercises a certain degree of consciousness. The quote you see on screen right now is not a demand, but a request set forth by the originator of the Guidestones. These are the words of the very originator of the Guidestones from his 134-page manifesto, which I have read in full and in which we'll cover in just a few moments. But first, let's talk about what happens when monuments are destroyed by religious intolerance and superstition, which arises from limited understanding of the monument and the intent of its architect. So I'm here today at the Great Sphinx of Egypt, which has been known by many names throughout history. Today, the local population that occupies the area here knows the Sphinx as Abu Hol, which means the terrifying one, or the father of terror. And the reason for that is because their ancestors believed that the Sphinx was terrifying, that it was sending a weird and creepy message. And so religious intolerance resulted in the destruction of its nose. You can see here from the side profile that the Sphinx is missing its nose, which has been destroyed. It was believed in antiquity that by destroying the nose, one would be destroying the very instrument in which the statue took its breath, that the living stone statue could no longer breathe, therefore decommissioning the magic of the monument. It shouldn't be too difficult to discern why destroying the nose and removing it from the monument disturbs the archaeological integrity of the monument, thus making it more difficult for future generations to study. So then, religious intolerance and people who view the Sphinx as weird, creepy, terrifying, and perhaps a threat destroyed the nose. Now tell me, do you really believe that the master builders who fashioned what is arguably the most spectacular sculpture on earth had that intention when they first fashioned this statue with its Buddha-like smile? Just go ahead and take a look for yourself. Look at that Buddha-like smile and tell me in the comments down below, do you think that eliciting fear and causing terror was the intent of the master builders who sculpted this monument? Ultimately, we don't know the objective truth. It's hard for us to say. Anything we say would be speculation based on our own preconceived notions and limited understanding of the ancient architect's point of view. The only way to truly know the intent of the architect would be to ask the architect or artist or sculptor themselves. This calls to mind a very basic lesson I learned back in high school. On the very first day of school, my teacher put this word up on the chalkboard and divided it as you see here on screen. And what he said was, don't assume. Because when you assume, you make an ass out of you and me. So my point here is that we shouldn't destroy things based on assumptions, mere assumptions that we convince ourselves are truths. Why not aim to always be honest with ourselves? How often do we step back and take self-inventory and ask ourselves if we know with absolute certainty that what we posit is correct? Most important, how do we know what we claim to know? I remember an interview with Napoleon Hill, author of the book Think and Grow Rich, where he challenges people who are making statements and positing information as fact with the word how. He asked them, how do you know what you know? And they all fall apart. Because they are challenged to provide their sources, and in many cases, the statements are speculative or rooted in judgments which stem from a limited understanding of the facts. How do you know what you know? Where did we get our information from? Is it a gut feeling based on our experiences and preconceived notions and limited understanding, or is it rooted in honest evidence? Are you saying what you say because it fits the narrative you suspect to be true? Or do you have the actual facts rooted in honest evidence to support your statement? I believe that those who are claiming these wild conspiracy theories that the Georgia Guidestones were erected by a satanic cult or by the Illuminati or by a nefarious group of global elitists as part of a genocidal depopulationist agenda cannot provide any honest, solid evidence beyond pure speculation. Ask any of these people how they know what they know and watch it all fall apart. Because these conspiracy theories demonstrate a lack of understanding for the concept of the Guidestones and the originator's intent. Now you might be asking, well, NEXT, how do you know what you know? And I will explain exactly how I know as we get more into the video. And I'm not saying anything that I have not already said a year ago. I also realize this is a new topic for a lot of people who may not have been aware of the Guidestones' existence before their destruction, but have somehow become experts on who built them and why within the last week. As an esoteric researcher, I have been investigating every aspect of the stones for more than a decade, and I've been to the Georgia Guidestones. In fact, I did a live video on Facebook last year where I basically said the same thing and even mentioned destruction. This is not the first time limited understanding attempted to damage, vandalize, or destroy the stones. There have been several attempts, hence why the Granite organization responsible for the stones installed a surveillance camera. Now, there was also an issue with my comparison of the Georgia Guidestones to ancient megalithic monuments. People were appalled that I would draw such a parallel between the ancient monuments and a modern monument, which many of them claim are architecturally inferior to those sacred monuments of the megalithic building culture. Some people responded by saying that the Guidestones are not ancient, but it's not a matter of time. It's not about when the monument was built. For the Sphinx and the Great Pyramid of Giza was also 30, 40 years old at one time. It's not about the age, it's about what the monument itself represents. The pyramids and the temples around the Sphinx all employ enormous megalithic stones, as well as encode and mark celestial phenomena which pay homage to universal eternal principles, which are part of a long-standing esoteric tradition. The tradition of megalithic building can be traced back to at least the time of the megalithic builders of Malta and their ruins, which predate the pyramids at Giza by centuries, according to the standard academic view. What's up, everybody? NEXT here, coming to you today from Hajaim, one of the world's oldest freestanding megalithic monuments. As I demonstrate with this model, there is a link between the megalithic site of Hajaim and the sun. At sunrise on the summer solstice, a ray of light enters through a hole to the northeast of the structure. The light is projected as a circle on a stone slab at the entrance to the apse. As the sun rises higher in the sky, the disk of light travels around the chamber, thus demonstrating the knowledge of astronomy and ability to mark celestial phenomena, both characteristic of the megalithic building tradition. So, do we devalue the megaliths of Giza simply because they are considered by academia to not be as ancient as the megalithic stoneworks in Malta? No, we respectfully preserve their cultural heritage. The stone's orientation with celestial phenomena exercises an acceptance of universal, eternal principles which direct the course of human affairs. Now, let's head back to America to see if we can find the same level of megalithic monumental building standards and to see if we can observe in our new version of megalithic monuments the same characteristics on par with the more ancient, and to see what we find encoded in the Georgia Guidestones.
What's up, everybody? NEXT here, coming to you from a place that I have long wanted to document at, and this is the Georgia Guidestones that you see behind me, the mysterious Georgia Guidestones. And I want to make this video in part out of frustration because a lot of the videos that I see on YouTube really don't do justice to what's happening here. At least in my opinion, I think there's a lot of misinformation as it relates to the connection to the Rosicrucian tradition with respect to this monument. Now, the Georgia Guidestones are, as you can see, 4 monolith stones. There's like this T-shaped stone here made from granite. We're in Elberton
County, Georgia. About 8 miles south of Elberton, we find the mysterious monument that has been named the Georgia Guidestones. It consists of 4 large upright blocks of granite, each 2 meters wide and 5 meters high. They are arranged to mark the limiting positions of the rising and setting sun in summer and winter. They surround a central stone which is oriented north to south. A channel through this stone is aligned with the celestial pole. On its south face is a sundial marking noontime throughout the year on a closed curve figure which reflects the equation of time, correcting the variations between solar time and time as recorded with uniform human hours. These characteristics are standard for marking celestial events, characteristics on par with the same set of standards employed by the megalithic builders at other megalithic vestiges from our ancient past. The only things separating them are time and the varying levels of consciousness derived from each originator's own experience and limited understanding. This is the case with all megalithic monuments. Just as the Great Pyramids at Giza are thought to be separated by more than 1,000 years from the megaliths in Malta, yet they both demonstrate knowledge of celestial phenomena, paying homage to universal principles, just as the Georgia Guidestones do. The value one attributes to ancient or modern megalithic monuments is purely subjective based on one's own experience and cultural inertias. Some may think it's sacrilegious for me to compare the Guidestones to ancient vestiges such as Stonehenge or the pyramids. But again, all of these monuments were at one time only 40 years old. On the other hand, some may see value in the fact that the Guidestones have been erected to convey certain ideas, not demands, not commandments, ideas across time to others. Stonehenge and other vestiges of ancient thought arouse our curiosity, but carry no obvious message for human guidance. Some people contest this comparison. I've been told on social media that the difference is that the Guidestones are part of a psyop, a psychological operation, which is defined as operations to convey selected information and indicators to audiences to influence their emotions, motives, and objective reasoning, and ultimately the behavior of governments, organizations, groups, and individuals. This is manipulation, and while most humans may not realize it, consciously or subconsciously, we manipulate each other all the time, because every conscious operation is to some extent a psychological operation. When you make a post on social media, it's a psychological operation intended to convey select information. You only hope it's going to make the impact you want it to make. Are you going to tell me that the awe-inspiring Great Pyramid and temples of Egypt are not built to convey information to audiences to influence their emotional motives, objective reasoning, and behavior? Another point of contention was that the Guidestones do not compare to the ancients because the Guidestones came down so quickly, because they are the product of shoddy work using poor quality materials. Respectfully, I have to disagree. The Sphinx has been destroyed, and the pyramids today are not what they originally were. The Guidestones employ the highest order of granite, a stone also used by the ancient Egyptians. But don't take my word for it. Let's hear from the vice president of the granite company responsible for the Georgia Guidestones.
My name is Christopher Cubis. I'm the executive vice president of the Elberton Granite Association.
How do you spell your last name?
Last name is spelled K-U-B-A-S.
You're in charge, your organization is in charge of maintaining
We do have a role in the maintenance and preservation of the Guidestones. The property itself is actually county property, and they maintain the security and the maintenance of the property itself.
Tell me about the Guidestones. I mean, there's a lot of conspiracy theories swirling about them, but kind of tell folks what they are.
So the Guidestones were a monument that was envisioned by one man.
How bad is the damage, and what's your, I mean, did it just break your heart to get up there and see it?
It did. I'm sad not just for Elberton and Elbert County, but I'm sad for the United States and for the world. These were a tourist attraction, and it was not uncommon for people from around the world to be up here at any given time. I've met people from Australia, from China, from all over the world here at these Guidestones. We probably have in excess of 20,000 visitors a year here. You know, it does break my heart. You know, if you don't like the message that was written on them, you know, that's understandable, that's your prerogative, but, you know, there's no reason to take it away from other people that might not find it and interpret it the same way. It's a testament to the craftsmanship of the granite industry here in Elbert County. Each one of those wings is 16 feet 4 inches tall. It's 1.7 inches thick, and it's 6'6" wide. They weigh about 42,000 pounds each. To quarry something of that size and get those 4 of them that precise, and then to letter them with the sandblasting that it took to letter those languages, that is utter craftsmanship that you would not find anywhere else. They had to be done here. And that's what we look at them, and that's what the majority of Elbert Countyans look at them, is the testament to the craftsmanship of the granite industry.
Let's stop this video right here. I will include a link to this full video interview in the description section down below. Now, I'm no stonemason, so I will defer to the expert opinion with respect to the level of craftsmanship. Here's someone who represents a top-notch company in the industry telling you that it's a high work of craftsmanship. Another comment I've seen is how the Guidestones lack lost technology used to erect the ancient monuments. While we can't be certain exactly what technology or technique was used to erect megaliths, we should be giving the archaeologists a little more credit because they have worked out some plausible theories. For example, at the megalithic sites in Malta, round stones have been found at most temples that may have been used to make transportation and maneuvering megaliths easier, as I demonstrate here in the interpretive center at Hajar'im. Different ways may have been used to lift megaliths into position. Here we can see 2 possibilities, the use of a wooden structure and the use of an earth ramp. But there's still the question of how they lifted some of the larger megalithic lintels or capstones into place without use of modern cranes. One wonders if 6,000 years from now, future archaeologists will recognize our techniques. Maybe our culture will become so codependent on artificial intelligence that we can no longer perceive how a crane could possibly lift a stone. I know it seems absurd, but if we can learn anything from our ancient past, it's not beyond the realm of reason to think our technique today may become a misunderstood technique or lost technology tomorrow. We like to pride ourselves on being the pinnacle of progress. However, as my mentor, the late great John Anthony West, pointed out in his work, there is a case to be made for long ascending and descending cycles of time where civilization can become degenerative on the descending side of the full spectrum. Despite the fiction we've all been brought up with, that is that history is a fundamentally steady, linear, and gradual ascent from primitive beginnings to our enlightened selves with our robotic DARPA dogs and virtual reality goggles. But this can be observed in the ancient civilization of Egypt with a careful study of art and architecture from the Old Kingdom to the late Ptolemaic and Greco-Roman periods, which reveal a degenerate civilization. And I would also recommend watching the 2006 comedy sci-fi film Idiocracy to help illustrate this point, as art often imitates life. Now, to be clear, I'm not saying that the Guidestones see the same number of tourists as Stonehenge or the pyramids, or that the Guidestones have the same impact upon our culture due to the educational conditioning we receive from our institutions through history books and so forth. But what I am saying is that they pay homage to the very tradition of megalithic builders and exercise a degree of understanding of knowledge of celestial events and respect for universal principles. And that's the work of someone that I would want to get to know. I may not agree with all of his ideas, but it's certainly someone worth listening to. Now, maybe you want to worry yourself sick about the New World Order, the military-industrial complex, global elitists, captains of industry, FEMA concentration camps, and robotic DARPA dogs chasing you back on the grid to place barcodes on your wrists and forcibly stick you with jabs. Personally, I think we need to stop pointing the finger at governments, cabals, Satanists, and world elites and start pointing the finger at ourselves. Meaning, we need to take responsibility for our own actions. There's no doubt that the world is filled with twisted people who have nefarious agendas, but the universe always has a way of balancing itself out. The world is also filled with independently wealthy and intelligent people with high levels of consciousness and clear vision who have the earth and all of humanity at heart. Now, there's always a little bit of truth to everything, but personally, I believe that many of these conspiracy theories are rooted in our own psyche and stems from our fear-based mentality and limited understanding. It's survival instincts, which are rooted in our fear of death. But what happens when you drop that fear of death? If you were right within, developed a deeper esoteric understanding, and knew how to properly meditate, none of this perceived nefarious external stimuli would affect you. Maybe it's time that we begin to understand that we have a limited understanding and accept that, rather than let ego prevent us from seeing that we are merely a microcosm of a macrocosm of a living being. Maybe you have bad vibes about the Georgia Guidestones and their vague language. But as I mentioned earlier in this video, people also had bad vibes about the Great Sphinx of Egypt too. They called it Abu Hol, the terrifying one, because the message it was sending was perceived to be a terrible threat. But then, in time, along came the discipline of Egyptology, and with that, a deeper understanding for the monument. But now the nose is gone today, and this creates some problems, preventing us from developing a clearer picture for its face. So accepting the fact that we may not know everything, and that our understanding of the monument and the words engraved on it may be limited, why not ask the originator himself? Why play a guessing game attributing it to the Rosicrucians or Ted Turner or to Satanists? Knowing that it is difficult to seed wisdom in closed minds, specifically when a mind has convinced itself that it is open or woke, and knowing that cultural inertias are not easy to overcome, the originator of the Georgia Guidestones sought to remain anonymous in order to avoid debate and contention. Nothing more, nothing less. He used the pseudonym RC, standing for Robert Christian. Using pseudonyms is not uncommon in esoteric tradition. Harvey Spencer Lewis, first imperator of the Rosicrucian Order Amorc, used a pseudonym for some of his literary works. William Walker Atkinson, a pioneer in the New Thought movement, used the pseudonym Three Initiates when he authored the Kabbalion, which presented the 7 Hermetic Principles. Claude Dawkins used the pseudonym Dr. Doriel when he wrote the Emerald Tablets of Thoth, the Atlantean. And centuries before all of these esotericists, the name Aristotle was used as a pseudonym in esoteric literature that went on to inspire some of the art and sciences today. Many people will argue that it's all nefarious because it's secretive, but there may be a good reason for secrecy. A proper explanation is beyond the scope of this video, but I will refer you to my mentor, the symbolist author John Anthony West's master work entitled Serpent in the Sky, The High Wisdom of Ancient Egypt, where he delivers an entire section on the question of secrecy. I will leave a link to his book in the description down below. One of the greatest lessons that I ever learned from my mentor, John Anthony West, was that giving opposition its due is one of the most challenging things for humanity to overcome. For the ancient Egyptians, it was not the job of Horus or Heru to destroy his opposition Set, but after all the contentions between Horus and Set, the goal was to reconcile. Because the esotericist knows that opposing forces manifest the creative principle, just as female and male come together to produce a new human, or positive and negative currents produce electricity. So even if the originator of the Guidestone seems to have opposing views, I don't think vague words are a reason to destroy the mysterious stones. If anything, it should be an invitation to seek out the originator to better understand his point of view. After all, this is someone paying respect to the high wisdom of the ancients. I'm not saying that you have to agree with his point of view or that I do, but I think getting to know more about his opinion and meaning behind the words on the stone is worth considering. And the real truth is that it's not as much of a mystery as people make it out to be. The Georgia Guidestones are not tied to any secular or political system. It's not Ted Turner. All of this comes from guessing games using pieces that we think may fit the puzzle. Nowhere on the stone is it saying that we must kill off and have genocide of everything above 500 million people on our planet of 7.8 billion people. The stones were engraved in the 1980s when we had nearly half as many of the people on the planet as we do today. Further, the stones were not intended as commandments, nor are they set forth by an authoritarian regime. They are the affirmations from the personal thoughts and experiences of a single individual who had some financial help from wealthy friends. And if you don't think that there are independently wealthy esotericists capable of erecting monumental stones without the help of global elitists, then I urge you to take a look at Sacred Bosco in Italy. That's not the work of global elitists, and neither are the Guidestones. But how can I be so sure of these things? How can I say these things with such confidence? Rather than rely on bad vibes, social media memes, and/or the bright insights from YouTube channels that claim to offer way more, yet lack the appropriate context, which is derived from meticulous research, I went straight to the source, or at least as close to it as possible. Because I believe that the best and most rational explanation for the meaning of this monument will come directly from the author himself, which may be ascertained by reading his book written by pseudonym Robert Christian. Writing with a pseudonym shouldn't discourage you from reading it or devalue the book in any way, as the author is transparent in his approach and reason for writing in pseudonym. And I quote, "I have chosen to remain anonymous in order to avoid debate and contention. Our guides must stand on their own merits," unquote. While the author's legal or surname may or may not be a mystery, what is certain is that he reveals way more about his background and personal thought process, as well as providing us with the real truth about the Guidestones. He clearly expressed in his 134-page manifesto, which was published as a limited run and given to high officials, in a similar manner to how the early Rosicrucian manifestos were published anonymously and delivered to high officials as an appeal. He clearly expresses his intent in his 134-page manifesto, which was published as a limited run and given to high officials, in a similar manner to how the early Rosicrucian manifestos were published anonymously and delivered to high officials as an appeal. The book is on file with the Library of Congress and available today for public view. A friend of mine told me about this book years ago, and I completely forgot about it until recently when another Facebook friend forwarded it to me. For the avoidance of doubt, just because I encourage people to read this book doesn't make me a eugenicist, a populationist, or racist, or any of the labels that you want to attribute to the book's author. It simply means that I choose to employ a healthy dose of tolerance in favor of entertaining discussion around these controversial ideas. So I'm not saying that I agree with every aspect of the book, but I do find it to be filled with reasonable thought and practical nuggets of wisdom. I'll leave a link where you can download a PDF copy in the description down below. The book is entitled Common Sense Renewed by Robert Christian. The title is an homage to a track entitled Common Sense by Thomas Paine, which brought important issues into focus for the general public. Now, it's not uncommon for people, when presented with a mystery, to add their own meaning to fill in the gaps. Many people want to assume and attach nefarious agendas of twisted people to this. They want to say it's part of a global plan of elitists to usher in a new world order. There can be little doubt that the author, R.C., had an interest in the idea of a limited but effective world order. However, the author clearly states, and I quote, "I am the originator of the Georgia Guidestones and the sole author of its inscriptions. I have had the assistance of a number of other American citizens in bringing the monument into being. We have no mysterious purpose or ulterior motives. We seek common sense pathways to a peaceful world without bias for particular creeds or philosophies. Yet our message is in some areas controversial." Unquote. Pathways to a peaceful world. Does this sound like a totalitarian regime or an oppressor to you? And without bias for particular creeds or philosophies, that doesn't sound like a racist. The documentary film Dark Clouds Over Elberton makes a compelling case for how R.C. is actually Dr. Herbert Hinsey Kirsten, and goes on to suggest how he was a white supremacist. Now, while it's plausible, I'm not entirely convinced yet. What I can say, in the interest of fairness, is that the statement, "without bias for particular creeds or philosophies," has no common measure with racism or eugenics for that matter. They have a historian in the film who claimed to know Kirsten from the country club, but it's painfully obvious that the historian clearly doesn't like Kirsten, and we can't say with absolute certainty why that is. For all we know, the historian could have been jealous of Kirsten for some reason or another. Maybe Kirsten stole the historian's girl at the country club, and this could have been his big chance to slander his enemy. We really don't know based on hearsay alone. So let's get back into the author's explanation in his written statement. I quote, "I have chosen to remain anonymous in order to avoid debate and contention. Our guides stand on their own merits." Unquote. So nothing nefarious about that. He's simply telling us that he's choosing to remain anonymous to avoid debate and contention. And after seeing how people behave and the things that they say online immediately following the destruction of the Guidestones, is it really any wonder why the guy wanted to protect himself? And if he was a doctor, knowing that his views were controversial and that could have an impact on his business practice, that could be another reason to avoid debate and contention. But admittedly, this is pure speculation. So continuing on with what he says, and I quote, "Two interested citizens of Elberton, Georgia, have been instrumental in bringing this project to completion. They are not sponsors, but have given invaluable assistance. They have served without compensation through motives of public service, even though they may not necessarily agree with the author in all of his beliefs. Mr. Wyatt Martin, who has an interest in Georgia's history, served as the project's fiscal agent. He assisted in selecting a site for the monument that would provide public access while remaining within budgetary limits. He enlisted community support for a small public park as a site for the monument." Unquote. So I just want to take a moment here to call your attention to the fact that it was Mr. Wyatt Martin who was involved with selecting the site for the Guidestones. He is featured in the documentary Dark Clouds Over Elberton and references the Masons in a way that would suggest he is not one himself. He was, however, acting as an intermediary for R.C. Christian, as well as influential people in Elberton, some of which included Freemasons, but many of whom never met R.C. Christian in person. So we can rule out the wild conspiracy theory that this is some evil Masonic plot for genocide. But there certainly were some Freemasons and members of the Rotary Club that did play a role in influencing the Guidestones location, mainly because they wanted to bring attention to Elberton County, Georgia, and the granite industry there, and knew that having the Guidestones there would be instrumental in that way. And an interesting fact to note is that R.C. Christian originally wanted the monument in another, more precise location that would have lined up with certain degrees which correspond to astronomical alignments in the sky. The Guidestones are within 1 degree of the 33rd parallel, as Gary David points out in his paper entitled "Along the 33rd Parallel, the Global Mystery Circle," to which I'll leave a link for you in the description down below. One wonders if R.C. originally wanted it precisely on the 33rd. We know that the project didn't go exactly according to his plan. He wanted a pyramidal-shaped capstone, but the budget did not permit. He also wanted the message of the stones to be extended to other stones surrounding the monument, but again, budget did not permit. Now, since when does the billionaire class of global elitists or the Illuminati or military-industrial complex not have enough money to make something so small yet so significant happen? If RC was Ted Turner, as some conspiracy theorists suggest, don't you think he would have had the money to make a pyramidal capstone? Further, in the documentary Dark Clouds Over Elberton, Mr. Wyatt Martin laughs off the idea of Ted Turner. Now, this is a man of integrity who is one of few who actually met RC. Analyzing his reaction, I have no reason to believe that Ted Turner is RC. Further, the film demonstrates how certain facts that line up with Dr. Herbert Kirsten do not line up with Ted Turner. Clearly, this was the concept of a single man who pulled together a small group of Americans with limited funds, and politics in favor of having the Guidestones in Elberton was influenced by Freemasons, not as part of some global plan, but as a means to bring attention to their local community and the granite industry there. This was not the original intent of RC. Back to the author's words, and I quote, "Mr. Joe Fendley, presently the mayor of Elberton, quarried the massive stones, engraved on them our message, and erected them on the site about 8 miles north of Elberton," unquote. Fendley was a Freemason, and he overseen the operation. He brought in Charlie Clamp to do the actual sandblasting of the lettering on the monument. So no major mystery there. The mayor was involved, Freemasons were involved, but none of them were involved with the original concept for the intent of the Guidestones. Some of the people involved are identified by name in the author's book, but again, he only uses a pseudonym, Robert Christian, for himself. Now, some people want to tie this to the semi-mythical leader of the Rosicrucians, Christian Rosenkreuz, but the documentary film, Dark Clouds Over Elberton, presents a compelling case for why RC may be Dr. Herbert Hinsey Kirsten, or a pseudonym meant to represent two authors, Dr. Herbert Hinsey Kirsten and his publisher. Regardless of his legal or surname, in other parts of the book, he tells us a bit more about his background and even his ancestry in America. Does his identity really matter? And by identity, I mean birth name and social security number. After all, what's more important, the messenger or the intent of the message? Now, while the book is comprised of scientific and historical facts, it constitutes his personal thoughts and remedies to world problems, as well as his intent for the Guidestones. Nothing in the book mentions genocide or killing off humans or forcing vaccinations as a resolve to what he perceives to be a population problem. But he does suggest a population policy, and with sound reason. Dr. Herbert Hinsey Kirsten was a conservationist with a love for nature who was known for his strong views on what he perceived to be a population problem. It was also written at the time when there was still tension between America and Russia, the Cold War, and the option of nuclear war was a real threat that could result in major catastrophe, one which could set back civilization. And this could explain his reason for maintaining population at a certain number based on his research. Now, while we don't know exactly how he arrived at the number of 500 million, what we do know is that he calculated that the planet's population would grow twice in size in just 20 years since he authored the book in the 1980s. And it has. The author has also clearly stated that the stones are not intended to be part of any sectarian or political system. He states that he is a plain American citizen and without authority. Now, he does touch on the idea of a New World Order. It's an idea to form a limited but effective world government. And I'm not saying I entirely agree or that you have to agree, but what I am saying is let's use reason. People often hear New World Order and it triggers their animal instinct without even rationally considering or unbiasedly exploring the idea of what a New World Order could mean, such as a New World Order where opposing, warring governments come together to form something new and peaceful, which could be a beneficial move for humanity and our planet. It should be noted that indigenous traditions worldwide were all about maintaining order with nature and the cosmos. And the ancient Egyptian civilization was centered around Pharaoh, whose job was to uphold Ma'at, the cosmic principle of equilibrium. In other words, order in perpetual balance. It is said that united a nation stands, But what if all nations and all of humanity stood united as one unified family, cooperating as a single organism for the greater good? There's no doubt that if we were all operating in unison, that we could achieve what the ancients once did, what we now label as ancient mysteries or lost technologies. Order doesn't have to mean oppression or total domination. It can be a limited but effective order that benefits all of humanity and the planet. It's called cooperation. Cooperation is what brings harmony. Any effort geared toward harmony is a good one in my book. It's certainly not something we should be destroying, even if we don't agree with the choice words or idea on the stone. What we have to keep in mind is that it's possible we may not be correct in our assumptions. So rather than assume, I encourage you to visit the link in the description section below to download the book and read it for yourself. Take time and let it marinate. Then let me know what you think in the comments below. Again, you don't have to agree with every aspect of it. I certainly don't. But at least use common sense and reason to try to better understand what the artist meant with his artwork, rather than feed speculation and attach meaning that doesn't even stem from the artist himself. He doesn't provide the metrics he used to arrive at the number 500 million, but I can tell you that he suggested the precepts be adapted to the changing circumstances of unknown future centuries. What we know is that the book was not written when we had 7.8 billion people on the planet. It was written when we had nearly half as many as we do today, and the book never called for genocide nor eugenics. It's clear after reading the book that the originator of the Georgia Guidestones was a well-thought-out, well-read, well-traveled humanist who sincerely cared for our planet and humanity at large. So let's put the exercise of giving opposition its due into practice and see what new dialogue we can open up by actually reading the book before casting judgments. Reading a passage from the book, the originator of the stones states, and I quote, "The Guidestones are not intended to have sectarian appeal. They are a reminder of the challenges that face present and future generations of humanity," unquote. So right here, he's telling us this isn't just about a future cataclysmic event. He's telling us that he sees a problem, a potential problem today, and it's a reminder about the challenges that we face in the present as well as the future. Now, he does offer some remedies, at least from his point of view, and a quick disclaimer here, this is one of those things that I do not personally agree with. Admittedly, I just don't know enough about it, but he says, a reduction in total numbers is essential to maximizing the potential of every human being. Now, I don't know exactly what he means by that or how he would go about this reduction, but in the interest of fairness, that's not necessarily eugenics or killing people off. The author does talk about guiding reproduction wisely, at least according to his perspective, but that's not necessarily killing people off. It's not some global plan to eliminate the population. Continuing on, and I quote, "They are intended to encourage efforts to meet those challenges rationally without favoring particular religions or political systems. We believe our thoughts are rational proposals for dealing with the problems that confront us. They are intended to stimulate discussion and logical, compassionate action," unquote. Right up here on the capstone is inscribed with an appeal to reason in 4 archaic languages. The monument is intended to combine certain attributes of the Rosetta Stone and many of the standing stones which are to be observed throughout Europe as remnants of past human societies. The originator of the Guidestones believed each human being has a purpose and a significant place in the divine plan of the universe. Does that really sound like someone who wants to issue genocide on all the excess people? I think not. He explains that the celestial alignments of the stones symbolize our need to be in harmony with eternal principles manifest in our natures and in the universe around us. 2 large faces on each of the 4 central stones are inscribed with 10 precepts or guides. The 8 faces carrying the same text in a different language. The English version has fewer than 100 words. The languages were selected for their historical significance and because of their use by people now living. It would not have been possible for the originator to represent each of the 3,000 languages known to exist in the human family today. His hope is that the stones would be copied in other lands by those who share his hope for a peaceful world based upon shared ethical values and a common respect for human reason.
So I just want to wrap up in saying that I stand by my statement that I do believe the destruction to the Georgia Guidestones was a heinous crime on par with destruction to any of the ancient vestiges that we have on this planet. I am tolerant of other views and I can coexist with opposing views. I would just ask that you use reason and base your reason on facts rather than speculation, feeling, superstition, what someone said, what a YouTuber said, or what you read in a book. And ultimately, I wish you nothing but peace profound. My name is NEXT. This is Adept Expeditions. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, please give it a like, share with your friends. If you're new here, consider subscribing for more videos like this one and a plethora of other styles, including vlogs, documentaries, and live videos exploring ancient civilizations from an esoteric lens.